flatland like a man on the run, riding down Highway 61. Sides of the roads all lined with fields, nothing but sunset in the windshield. Feel it as soon as I ride into town. This is where I go to slow down. Miles and miles of soybeans and corn. I'm in the place where the blues was born. About a mile from the big muddy river, place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my worries drift away from being out in the sun all day. No matter where in the world I go, I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
What's up, guys? Brad Chappell back at the Grizzly Jig Show Spring in 2024. It's going to be a fun deal. I know it's one of these things that I look for every single year, coming here, hanging out with my buddies, meeting all the new listeners and old listeners of the Crappie Connection. So make plans next year to come to Grizzly Jig. Make sure you bump into each one of us and say hi. But I'm going to let these guys do a little introduction, and then I'm going to show out the topic for them to discuss.
Awesome. So I'm Kent Driscoll, Pro Staff Manager for B&M, and glad to be here again. This is about my 15th year to be at the show. It gets bigger and better every year. Great seminars, great deals. Man, all the pros are here. So, everything's on sale.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of knowledge in this room, and, we get to hang out with guys like Brad and, and Hunter.
Yeah.
And, I always look forward to it, man, just fellowship and the fun and everything. And glad to share the mic today with my buddy Preston Cleary over here.
First time on the Crappie Connection as well. I like that.
Yes, it's my first time. I'm Preston Cleary, and I'm a guide on Del Hollow Lake. I've been doing it for a few years now. I've developed a pretty sweet little float technique for the spring, and I can catch fish from anywhere from 2 feet of water to 50.
Well, the topic this show is going to be slip bobbers in the spring targeting these crappie. And I know Kent, as soon as I handed him the list, he's like, there's no doubt which one I want to do. So he put his name down and put Preston's name down really quick. And I can't wait to hear more about this because it takes us back to the roots of crappie fishing for myself anyway. I know whenever I got into crappie fishing, it was actually at that time, sitting around in a boat or on a pier watching bobbers go down, and everybody still loves it.
Yes, it's a good way to change things up, and you can get rid of the live scope aspect of it, and it's more of a traditional way to do things, and it's effective.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know, Kent, tell us about some of the ways that you like utilizing this slip bobber techniques in the springtime here.
Yeah, so, I'm in Nashville now. I fish mainly Percy Priest and Old Hickory, which are, like 30 minutes to both lakes from me. But I also go up to Del Hollow with Preston and Corey Thomas, and they both guide on the lake up there, and that is a completely different fishery than what I fish on. And the big difference is clear water. We're dealing with really, really clear water. So you're talking about fish that are a lot more spooky, they're a lot more finicky, you got to be much more finessey. And these guys have basically developed a slip float technique for clear water that is just killer. I mean, it is absolutely killer the way they catch fish. And I've kind of brought it back to, I went up and fished with both those guys last year, and I brought it back, and I'm kind of using it now in my, toolbox and, around home. And it's just a fun, effective way to catch fish. And to Preston's point, we use the live scope to kind of find the brush pile and identify the fish, but really then we might not use it as much. It's not like we're catching an individual fish. Most of the time we're fishing either man-made brush piles, standing timber, stake beds, or something along those lines. And usually there's big groups of fish, in these brush piles. And you've got to stay back from them. The key is not to spook them. You try to catch the fish that are on the top first. So you set your slip bobber maybe a foot just above where you see the fish, catch a few of them, and then as you catch a few, the fish get smarter, and you'll notice they kind of they start moving.
Catch the dumb ones real quick.
Yeah, and usually catch the biggest fish first.
Mm-hmm.
Usually there's a dominant fish in every brush pile, and if you'll target that fish like right off the beginning or right off the bat, a lot of times you can catch that fish. And then you start adjusting, you start setting it a little bit deeper, or you start moving around the brush a little bit and, setting your float, at different depths. And then, a lot of times for fishing with live bait, but, you can also flip over to like a real light jig.
Yeah.
And something small and like a trout magnet, like a 1/64th ounce trout magnet, something along those lines. Or, even a really small, hair jig, like a Popeye jig. And that's something that's really, really popular, especially up there around Preston's part of the world. Yeah.
We're talking about advantages of this thing, and I know Kent hit on it real quick, like was, not spooking fish. Do you think, what is another advantage of this technique that you really think it highlights it?
So I'm able to stay in a certain water column for a longer period of time. When you get on these crappies, when you get on their nest, like, you need to be completely still. But here's the thing, these 16-foot rods, they're not going to work on Del Hollow. You're going to have to be away from these fish. You're going to have to be 25 feet to 30 feet away from them, pitching in on them. And see, if you pitch a 16-foot rod, it's going to fall back. It's going to be moving. So the advantage of that is if you want to set your bobber at 2 feet, you throw out past the old dead wood, and you come back just across it and let it sit there. It'll take a second, but that big fish will come up and hammer it.
Different bites when you talk about slip bobbers and things. Is there certain particular bites that, a particular bobber is better than the other one, or sizes of bobbers? What's kind of the basics as far as a good style bobber that you really like to use?
Stan's Slip Float makes one. It's an XXL. It'll carry a 1/4 ounce weight, and it's got watermarks on it. He's just came out with this bobber, and it's got different gauges on it. And this one bobber setup is all you need for any type of situation, anywhere from 2 foot of water to 35 feet of water. It'll work, and all of it's a 1/4 ounce weight.
With the springtime here, and what are some of the areas that you're going to key in to utilize slip bobbers in the spring whenever they're spawning?
Oh, well, what I'm going to key in on?
Yeah.
So I'm going to backs of creeks, and I'm looking for a mud flat. The flatter the better. And what I'm looking for is an old piece of timber. Most people, they look for brush. I look for an old piece of timber laying down in the water, and I want to make sure that timber rides down to 5 feet of depth. And at that 5 foot of depth, the older the better, like I said. And you'll set your bobber to about 3 foot deep and cast in there and just drag it back across it. Don't cast on top of them because you're going to spook them.
That splash of the bobber?
That splash of the bobber. And you just drag it back over top of them and just let it sit there. And it won't take long. That big female crappie, she won't want that jig in her. She won't want it in her bed for long.
Her territory is going to get evacuated.
You don't mess with the babies.
Yeah. Ken, I know you fished tournaments all these years, and you know how to find crappie flat out.
Mm-hmm.
It's been proven too many times. And so what are some of the areas that you're going to look for with all the experience? I know you fish muddy water to clear water now, but in the springtime and you're wanting to go out and you're using these slip bobbers, what are some of the things that you're going to try to key in on as well?
Yeah, so, last year when I went up with Preston and these guys, we were kind of pre-spawn. We were about 2 weeks out.
Yeah.
And, man, they showed me how to fish these weed beds in like 10 to 12 foot of water. And these fish were basically staging in these weed beds, and they were getting ready to go to the bank, like he was talking about, and get on those laydowns on the bank. And, man, we had a lot of fun doing that last year. So I'm looking for structure that the fish are going to relate to, typically in the back of coves, usually on the northern end of the lake that warms up a little bit quicker. I'm looking for a little bit more stained water, It has a tendency to warm up a little bit faster. And, any kind of cover, especially on Priest, these fish move from brush pile to brush pile depending upon the time of the year. And all they're doing is just changing depths. and they're getting ready, to do their thing and spawn. And most of the fish at Priest spawn in 10 foot of water or less.
Yeah.
So, most of the time I'm looking in the back of the major creeks. Most of the time I'm upriver. I'm not down towards the dam or down towards some of that clearer, deeper water. I'm kind of following the fish as they migrate, upriver and up these creeks and into these bays. And just, really, depending upon what lake I'm in, I'm on. I'm just looking for some type of cover that are holding those fish, yeah.
Have you, I know he just said dead wood is kind of your favorite piece to really key on. Would that be the same scenario for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Or do you have that dead wood is just like the magnet that shines?
I like the big, like oak type, burly hardwood type trees that have fallen down that have been in the water for a long time. I would rather fish around a big log, that doesn't have as many limbs, so to speak, because they have a tendency to congregate right where that log meets, the bank or the mud, like Preston was talking about. And that's the one beauty of like live scope fishing. It helps you can find that stuff a lot faster, than traditional sonar or side scan or down imaging. But yeah, I'm looking for, spawning type cover. It kind of depends too, like on Priest, as I get upriver, there's a lot of stake beds, man-made stake beds in 3 to 6 foot of water. And a lot of them you can't see. They're underwater. They're just under the water. And, man, there's a lot of spawning crappie that get in those stake beds.
When you go to an area like that, what are you expecting to catch? How long are you going to stay? If you're going to try to catch 5 or 10, and if you're not getting bites, how long would you before you move this bobber setup?
Well, it would take me it wouldn't be very long, because when they get on these laydowns out there on that dead wood, if they're there, they're gonna bite, because they're aggressive over their beds, and they're probably not really that hungry. They just want you to get your bait out of the bed. Yeah, get it out of there, and it don't take long. But now they will eventually get smart and they'll get pressured. So you'll go to each laydown, you'll catch 2 or 3, especially on Dale. And it'll be time to move. Biggest advice on Dale: move as fast and often as you can.
One of the mistakes that you might have seen guys doing slip bobbers, what is one of the mistakes that really keys into your mind that people are doing wrong when it comes to slip bobbers?
They'll wait for their bobber to go under.
That's a great tip.
So describe what you're looking for as far as finding that finesse bite or what have you.
So the finesse bite, I'll watch this bobber. It'll sink down just maybe 1/4 of an inch. When I see it go down, set the hook. When I see the bobber pop up and fall over, you set the hook.
What's happening then?
What has happened is that female crappie has came up and grabbed that bait, and she's coming up with the weight. And it's released the tension and the pressure off the bobber, so the bobber is going to naturally fall over because there's nothing holding it down in the water. So it's as good as it going down.
I tell you, there's an art to bobber fishing, because really it's a strike indicator.
Yeah.
And just like Preston's talking about, and these fish bite it differently all the time. And there's times that you'll just see the bobber move, and it'll just start moving away from you. And that fish has got it, and it's in his mouth. He's just not being real aggressive with it. There's other times they'll sink it out of sight the second it hits the water. And then, you'll get some of those tap bites,
Yeah.
And, it's fun, but you've got to pay attention, and, there's times, and I know Preston, since he's a guide and he's got a lot of, different anglers,
Their ability,
yeah, they're, you got beginners and, kind of intermediate, and then, some very experienced anglers, but I can tell you, I've been with him. He knows. He's watching that bobber the entire time, and it's kind of an art to it, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun, man. That bobber fishing, man. Anybody can do it, and it's super effective. And like he was talking about, if I can catch 3 to 5 fish off one spot, I'm happy. And then I'm gonna go duplicate that spot. I'm gonna either move to another part of that brush pile, that laydown, or just move the boat and go to a new spot.
And I look at it in general as far as crappie fishermen goes. I think a lot of times people get so much confidence in one spot. They're wanting to just live and die by that one spot.
Sit there all day.
Yeah.
You're talking about that, the bad side of things. It is a slow presentation, but you can't wait too long. Sounds like
No.
if you don't see a bite in 3 or 4 minutes, you need to leave it.
You need to
or
go
before that.
You need to move on and stop fishing memories.
Fishing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think everybody's been guilty of that. I mean,
Yeah,
I know I have
absolutely.
too. You're like, man, I know this spot's on these fish, but now live sonar, those guys can tell, but even the guys that don't. How long would you say they need to fish that bobber and they don't see anything? Go ahead and move it.
Couple minutes.
2 to 5 minutes?
Yeah, that'd be a fair.
Yeah, I'm thinking 2 to 3 minutes myself. Yeah.
That's pretty quick, really.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, I mean, you think about it, a lot of times you'll see these guys and they're just sitting in one spot all day, and, I mean, they're probably fishing on memory, sound like.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's hit and run. I mean, if you're not catching them, you need to be moving on. Yeah, for sure.
Well, tell us about what pole you guys are using, what line, and some of the basic equipment that you need to do this technique and do it well.
Okay. So the pole that I'm using, it's a stiff pole. I want a stiff pole to carry this heavy bobber. I'm using a 1/4 ounce worm sinker, worm weight underneath this XXL bobber. And I'm making my own, I'm tying my own bobber stop out of braid, preferably a Berkeley Fireline. I use 10-pound test.
It's pretty particular.
The reason why I use that is because whenever that Berkeley Fireline, it goes up in that bail, because sometimes I'm fishing 20, 30, 40 foot deep, and it doesn't hang on the line. It'll glide off the
That spool wheel.
yeah, it'll just come right off, and it don't hang. Now, these other rubber bobber stops and stuff, they hang up. The line gets wrapped over top of it, and it'll hang, and you'll go to cast, and next thing you know, you've got hit in the eye by a bobber. We've all done that.
The thing about bobbers, and I always think about, you can visualize this technique so easily when somebody's describing it. I can sit here, as you guys are telling me about it, I can sit here and imagine these bobbers going down as we're talking right now.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
it's a ton of fun, and the cool thing too is I like using a short rod. I use a 7.5 foot, the Bean M75 series combo, and I can control it. Okay,
Right.
so if I'm pitching, I just open the bail. I've got my slip float. I can pitch that thing 25 to 30 feet super accurately, and that's the beauty of using a rod at that length. It's not too long, but it's not too short, and it's super effective, man. When you've got to stay back away from the fish just a little bit, just to pitch it out there with a slip float, pitch it past your target, okay, and then either let the wind bring it back to your target, or you just slowly reel it back. And you do want a rod that's got some backbone, because when that bobber goes down, you want to set that hook and get a good hook set on the fish. Yeah, that's the one thing, is the hook set's important with a bobber. You have to set the hook. They will not hook themselves. Yeah.
what about size of hooks here? And do you have a particular size hook that if you're going to use minnows to say?
Yeah, I like a small hook.
A number 4 to
Yep.
a number 6.
Yeah, 4 or 6. I agree 100%.
Aberdeen style, or
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that goes back into the very basics and the beginning of my crappie fishing days there for sure.
Yeah, let me back up a little bit too. Preston mentioned this. The stand slip bobber that we're using it's very unique. It's kind of one of a kind. It's a balsa float, but it's got a micro eye at the top of the bobber. In other words, the eye that your line goes through is very, very small diameter. Okay. And it's polished, so it'll slide real easy up and down your line. But the trick to it is you don't have to use a bead, okay? And that bead will get hung up in your guides. It'll actually go through your top guide sometimes. And it's just less, it lets you cast further. And that bobber slides up and down the line a whole lot faster and a lot easier, and it's a better strike indicator. And then Stan also makes a micro bobber stopper, kind of what Preston's talking about. Preston ties his own, and I've used them and seen them, and they're awesome. And there's zero resistance with his slip bobber, and you can move it up and down your line real easy. You can't hardly see it because he trims it real short. But having that small, fine bobber stopper, or the bobber tie, and it sits on top of that bobber, it just lets you adjust real easy. It helps you see the strike better, and it's just super effective.
This technique too, I think about it, and you don't have to use this technique on a boat either, do you?
No, you don't.
No,
You can
not
use
at
it from
all.
a dock.
I mean, you think about fishing from the bank. I mean, that's how I grew up fishing, from the bank, tossing out slip bobbers. And, you know, I think we get so caught up nowadays with the live sonar and really focusing on fine-tuning that technique, but it's blatantly obvious that this technique, you can use it on a boat, a pier, just anywhere, huh?
Yeah,
Oh,
anywhere
absolutely.
you want. It works great.
And Kenton, you can answer this. I don't think we've said it before, but what's a mistake that you see common people use, or when it comes to slip bobbers?
You know, a lot of people use those bobbers that snap on, okay?
Oh, yeah.
And they snap them on their line, and it's just hard to fish very deep with a snap-on type. A slip float lets you, like Preston said, you can fish from 2 foot of water to 30 or 40 foot of water just by moving that bobber stop. And that's the beauty of a slip float, is it's truly adjustable to any depth you want. And when you start fishing deep and you start reeling that bobber stopper inside of your reel and you start casting out and stuff, you'll notice how much more effective it is to use that smaller diameter bobber stop and not have a bead. And so, yeah, I see a lot of people using the old traditional plastic floats.
Those big
And,
round?
Yeah, the big round ones, man. And, you know, a lot of times, too, people use too big of a bobber, okay? And it's not matched to the weight that they're using. And you get a giant bobber like that, and, you know, you don't see the bite.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the strike indicator part of it kind of goes away. And, you know, a fish can feel the resistance of that big bobber, too.
That
And
pressure, yeah.
Yeah, and he won't pull it under like he will. When you really get a good bobber matched up, and, you know, especially these slip floats, you're only going to see about a third of the top of that bobber. And then a good bobber like the Stands will have watermarks on it, and you'll see those little lines right there. And once you start looking at that bobber, you're going to start looking at those lines. In other words, you'll see like if it's a fluorescent orange and it's got a red line or a white line, you're going to focus on that red and white line. If that red and white line disappears,
I can see it now.
yeah, you probably got a bite. Yeah,
I can see it right now in my head.
For sure, man.
You know, another thing that I think about when is the advantages of taking people of all ages out doing this technique that you get to utilize. You know, from any experienced angler to the advanced. Is that one of the advantages that you also see with this deal?
Yeah, I get to. Anybody can catch them with the bobber. Like but it is a technique to it at times. But this bobber here, it takes you away from live scope a little bit, brings you back home to traditional style setup.
Yeah, the beginning.
And it's just a good method, and it's a fun method to do it. And sometimes it's good to change things up and have a little fun doing it. And I see age groups from old to young, and they all love it. Sometimes people don't think they'll like it at first.
Yeah.
But when you hauls a 2-pound plus crappie out of a bed on a bobber that's just set 2 foot up under the water, I mean, it's just like you know, it's like a new fish every time you see another one. You know, it's a great feeling.
And I can't touch on it as well, but setting the hook. And one of my biggest, the client I had in my boat yesterday, it was very shortly there. He gets a fish and he's just slowly bringing it in, and I'm like, dude, don't do. I mean, let's snatch him on in here.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
he's like, man, this is paper mouth, and I was like, forget that word has ever come into your mindset. But as far as you with these slip bobbers, how do they actually need to set the hook and bring in the fish?
Just a good solid pickup. You know, you don't want to bass. Bill
Darken
Lance
it,
yeah. Don't try to double the rod over when you set it, but just give it a good pop. And that's all you need to do, just to give it a little pop. Their mouths are soft, but you're not going to hurt them by just giving it a little bit of force. And you don't want to not give it enough where the bobber don't even move. So just kind of give it a good solid jerk, but not where you're going to break the line.
Right. What size line are you typically using? I don't know if I asked
I'm
you
using
that.
4 pound.
4 pound, wow.
4 pound.
You can't set it too hard, then it's definitely going to snap.
Well, I use the Trout SOS line, and it's pretty stout stuff. And they're 2 pound stout too. But I really like that Trout SOS line. The 4 pound strong stuff. Good monofilament. It's very forgiving. And that rod there, you know, it'll bend over. It'll take some punishment.
I know. Do you prefer clear line as well, or?
I do. On Dale, when it's really clear, I find that the clearer the line, the better off I am, because those fish, they know.
Something ain't right.
Yeah, something ain't right about that.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming on, and I know I've learned a little bit more about this, and we're going to have a video of you afterwards actually setting this slip bobber and everything up, so I can't wait to see both of your guys' tips afterwards. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Tell us if you actually like this technique, and in the comments, how can somebody find you and book a trip and go crappie fishing?
You can look me up on Facebook under Cleary Kentucky Fishing, or you can call me or text me at 808-366-6085.
That's good enough for me. Kent, where can they find this pole?
Hey, obviously Grizzly Jig.
Huh?
B&M website, and all of our major retailers carry the 75 series combo, and it's just a great all-around versatile pole.
Yeah.
Again, it's my all-time favorite for casting bobbers. Absolutely.
I know I cast regular jigs with it and do it with everything, and it is a workhorse. And there's no doubt about it in my mind as well. So definitely check out the poles, check out Preston, and guys, we'll see you later. Holla.
About a mile from the big muddy river, a place I'll always remember. Cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel